Hello, I'm interviewing my father, Edward Danio. I'm also Edward Danio. We're not very creative with names. So, first question, Dad. What are some of the oldest family memories that have been told and passed down about our family?
Um, I think some of the oldest family memories have to do with the grandfather that died before my dad was even born. It was told to us that um, he had been in World War One. It was told to us that in World War One he had been gassed and there were some problems with his lungs and things. And he lived in German, Pennsylvania, Jermyn, and
Near Scranton, I think.
near Scranton, up in northeast Pennsylvania. It's kind of the coal mining country, and what happened was he was on his way home from work one day, and the story goes that some lady came stumbling out of her house saying that, and the house was on fire, and saying that her children were inside, and and so he went in at least 3 times to try to save them. That was documented, and so he come to find out he died of smoke inhalation trying to save those kids, and come to find out that the man had set fire to the house because his wife was a drunk and he had taken the kids out. So the kids weren't even in there. So my
Died for
grandfather,
no reason.
he died for no reason. So my grandmother was 7 months pregnant with twins. My dad was one of those twins. So I think she went into labor right after she buried him. She already had 3 kids. So she went into labor premature, had my father and had his sister, and they were named Adam and Eve, which my dad hated. Adam and Eve. So my dad was actually born Adam, um, and he was the runt of the litter. But family and friends had to take turns holding them up to the heat lamp because they didn't have incubators and stuff, and they were dirt poor and they couldn't afford anything. So, um, long story short, Eve died, but my dad survived, and but he basically grew up without a dad. His dad, passed before he was even born. So, and currently,
Did he change his name from Adam?
yeah, my dad. Yeah, exactly. My
Mhm.
dad changed his name from Adam. He changed it to Edward at some point. I'm not even sure where that happened.
Right.
But he did change his name to Edward. And at some point, he changed his last name to uh, Daniel. Also, at some point, he and my uncle changed their last name to Daniel.
Which is what it used. What it was originally.
Right, what it was originally. My
Before great grandma got remarried.
Yeah, before she got remarried. Yeah.
Okay.
So my grandfather, he served, he served in the military, in World War One. But like so many other immigrants, his last name was Danio, Danyo,
Mm-hmm.
but they wrote down Daniels, Daniels,
Mm-hmm.
and then and that basically name stuck with him until he was naturalized and was changed. I think. I don't know. There's a lot
Yeah.
of funky things that with name changes and stuff that went on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the oldest, and that's the one that everybody knows in the family because it is somewhat strange and somewhat somewhat traumatic. But
Thank you. So this is a second question. Where did Daniels come from, and where did they live prior to 1922?
okay, so Daniel, my dad always used to say that we were Russian, and that Daniels were Russian. And so at some point, I visited German, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the church and found out we were actually from Czechoslovakia,
Okay.
and not Russia. And and there's this little town in Czechoslovakia somewhere called Zempln, Zempln or something. And I researched it back then, and that's kind of what I found out. But I don't know anything more than that.
Just Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, my Teta Olga. Teta is aunt in Russian. My Teta Olga, she used to visit. She used to go with the church. There's a Russian Orthodox church in German that used to go over to that part of Czechoslovakia annually, and they would go and they would take food and they would take clothes because evidently it's a really really poor part of Czechoslovakia. So.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Thank
So
you.
that's what it was prior to 22 and somewhere.
So I guess it was still in Pennsylvania though prior to 22 when he immigrated over.
Right. So German Pennsylvania. So if this is Pennsylvania, here,
Yeah.
German Pennsylvania is up here,
Northeast, yeah.
northeast, near Jim Thorpe, that area, Scranton. And it's after my grandfather died. My grandmother remarried and moved here, southwestern Pennsylvania,
Right.
but I'm not sure what the dates.
Yeah,
were
we don't
or anything
know.
of those. Mm-mm.
So part of that, can you give me a short genealogy of our family? How far back can we go with names?
Whew, the farthest I can go back is to my grandmother and my grandfather. So it would be Michael Daniel or Michael Daniels or Michael Danio, and my grandmother was, oh my gosh, I forget her name, Mary.
Mary, yeah.
Mary. And her maiden name was Lepatra, and she had a sister, and she had, I'm sorry, no, she had a brother, Mike Lepatra also. Mike must have been a popular name back then. And that's about as far back as I can go
what kind of
on
kids,
the Daniel side.
What kind of, were the kids' names?
Okay, so my grandmother.
Basically your aunt's uncle.
Yeah, so my grandmother had 5 kids from my grandfather. So it was Bill was the oldest, then Dorothy was the second oldest, and then Olga was the next youngest, and then my dad was the very youngest. And then once she got remarried, she actually had 3 other children with her new husband, which was Marco, and her last name became Olich then, Oulich. And they had Eli, Sophia, and Mickey.
Mickey,
yeah. Those were 3 from her new marriage.
Yeah. So
there were 7 kids total, 8 if you count
Eve that
passed childbirth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what is the family's religious background?
Our family's religious background, again, is Russian Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox technically, but any church that we went to was Russian Orthodox.
They speak Russian in the church, and
yeah, everything is chanted in the church to the religious background. I mean, it was really long, and
it's like 3-hour masses, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's 3 hours, but it was everything of 90 minutes, almost 2 hours, and it was very. They use incense like crazy, and everything is chanted. The priest chants and the choir sings, and so the whole thing, and it's a lot like Catholicism. The whole profession of faith in the Orthodox Church is the same as Catholicism,
right.
and if you look from a Catholic perspective, Orthodox are the only ones outside of Catholics who can actually get communion in the Catholic Church. And that's because of the profession of faith, and because I think they were originally the same religion at some point, but
before the Great Schism, yeah,
probably. But they weren't. My mom loved to go to church, but back then my parents were dirt poor. They had, we didn't have any money, so we didn't have really nice clothes to wear to church. And I remember when they started publishing every week in a Russian Orthodox church how much people gave. So my dad didn't have any money to give, and when it showed that we weren't given anything, he just got too embarrassed and never showed up again. So
that's a shame.
Yeah, it was terrible. Church, I mean, it was pretty heavy-handed. It was pretty terrible. So yeah.
What was it like growing up as a Daniel?
My life was kind of interesting. I'll go back to my dad's. So my dad, he didn't have a dad. He used to always say that he didn't really have a dad until she married Marco. But he grew up on the streets of a little town called Muse, Pennsylvania, which is a coal mining town, and he grew up very, very tough. He was a very, very, very tough person. And me growing up, we lived in a very, very small house that they rented, and they had, you know, I grew up, I didn't have a bed. I mean, I slept on the couch until I went into the military. That was the first time I really had slept in a bed, is when I went into the military, because we just didn't have enough money. And the bar was attached to the house. It was a dive bar. It was across the street from the projects in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, and we had bikers, and there are stories, and my aunt had pictures of me like sitting on the motorcycle handlebars of the motorcycles, and they would take me out and ride me around. And I remember at one point somebody gave me a star, and they told me I was the sheriff. I was a little kid, and come to find out later that one of the guys had beaten up a cop.
Oh my goodness! He
took his badge. Yeah, it was crazy. I actually saw first time I saw somebody shot. I was 7 years old. It was a rough. Growing up, it wasn't easy. It was pretty rough.
So there's always like a kind of looks like from grandpa on, it was always depressed economically.
Yeah, it was really depressed economically, and I mean, I remember thinking, I wonder if my grandfather never would have gone in that house, how would my life have been different? I mean, that one decision. I mean, this kind of, because
grandfather would have had a father growing up younger.
He would have had a father growing up. The whole, who knows where he would have lived if he would have been, if he'd have graduated school, or I mean, there's just so much was triggered by that, by that one decision. I mean, it really put my grandmother in significant economic distress.
Thanks. So, like, what type of traditions have been practiced and passed down?
The biggest traditions are probably around Christmas. Well, Christmas and Easter, around the holidays.
Right.
The one thing that set us apart is we were Russian Orthodox. Going through school, while kids celebrated Christmas on the 25th, we didn't celebrate Christmas on the 25th. We celebrated it on the 7th. So January 7th. I'm sorry. Yeah, we celebrated January 7th, and so what would happen was we would go, and you'd get out of school. Everybody else would get their Christmas presents. You'd come back to school, and everybody would talk about what they got, and then they would ask me, "What did you get?" And I would be like, "Well, Christmas isn't here yet." And well, you got a lot of looks, and you got a lot of people thinking, "Boy, you're really, really, really strange." And that went on for a couple of years until I don't know what happened, but something flipped in my mind one year, because somebody was making fun of me pretty bad, going, your Christmas isn't here yet, you didn't get anything.
Yeah.
And something flipped in my mind where I went, wait a minute, January 7th is way before December 25th, or January 7th is way before December 25th. And I'm like, dude, you got your presents like 50 weeks after I got mine.
Nice.
And it actually worked out. It actually, and that became my mantra after that. I had something to kind of be, kind of be proud of. And then around Easter, the only other thing I remember is, my parents used to decorate the bar like to the nines for Christmas. They had 12 by 12 inch tiles on the ceiling. Every single one of those had a Christmas bulb hanging down on a piece of fishing line. So you couldn't really see the fishing line, but all the bulbs were like hanging down. It was really cool. I mean, they really, really did a nice job. And I say they, we decorated it. It would take 2 days to decorate the place, Saturday and Sunday. And then for Easter, we did what was called a black fast for Easter. It's where for 40 days you would eat nothing made from an animal. Nothing made from an animal. So we're talking no milk, no cheese, no eggs, obviously no meat. We didn't have any fish, so it was basically, because my dad hated fish, so it was basically beans, peanut butters, and crackers is about what we ate, because you couldn't eat
Wow.
butter, you couldn't eat anything for 40 days. That was probably one of the most difficult.
That's amazing.
That was one of the most difficult things to to kind of get through. It
Was that, I guess, a Russian Orthodox thing?
Yeah, it was a Russian Orthodox thing. Yeah, it was.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was kind of. I mean, those are probably the most. The biggest thing is. If I go back to Christmas, we used to have a Christmas Eve dinner called Satya Vechet,
Yes, that's
and
really
that was where nothing is made from an animal either from it. But we had things like pierogis and babakas and orsuk, shaprashka, and that's kind of like it's kind of like sauerkraut.
right.
Sauerkraut, and then we had beans and we had peas. We had a lot of vegetables, but actually, that meal, the way it was prepared, was so good.
Really?
Yeah, and I think the only thing that we've carried on and I've tried to pass down to you guys is really getting together and making the pierogi part of that meal. I
Yeah,
think that's
we
the
did that.
only. I mean, so the homemade
Passed down to me,
pierogies,
yeah.
pass that down to you and your
Sister does a really good job.
Samantha. Yeah, she does a really good job on that. And who knows? At some point, we might get back to the whole, that whole thing. But that's kind of where we're at with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So what type of have any heirlooms been passed down through the family? Artwork, photographs, church membership, stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely no church memberships. But we really didn't have much to pass down. I think you probably have with your icons and things that you have there. This is my mom's Bible.
Little prayer book. Yeah, I got that from
her little prayer book, and this is.
So it's a half in Czechoslovakian and half in English.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I don't know if you want to.
So try to open up to some of the.
It's one half's on one and other half's on the other.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
So just give an example. It's like prayers, and half is English and half is Czechoslovakian, and it's got the Russian Orthodox cross, and everything's in Russian.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And we also have. I got my grandmother's icons, which were blessed by the church. And from what we understand, these were illegal to take from Russia.
Yeah, from what I understand,
for many years
are illegal to take from Russia, but those are blessed and everything, by the church. And then we've got some of these documents that we have that my aunt just ended up giving me less than 6 months ago.
Yeah, so we have my grandfather's honorable discharge post World War I, which accompanied pictures of him, one in uniform and one, I guess, prior to joining the military. And we have a very interesting photo. We don't really understand how it was made, but it's a photo of him again in the military, and it's kind of put on a tin. So we really don't know how it's very fragile, and it's already torn up a little bit prior to us getting it. So it's very interesting. So we have to do more research on that.
And it's got newspaper backing behind it. I almost want to take it apart to see what the newspaper, the year of the newspaper was, because then we at least know when it was mounted.
Right. And with we were talking about, so his discharge papers say, where is it at? I'm sorry. It says, it's hard to read, but it says Michael F. Daniels, but his naturalization papers say Michael Daniel. So that's where he changed it once he was naturalized. So it looks like he was naturalized after he served in World War I. So his gravestone actually still has Michael Daniels as his gravestone.
Yeah, and that was because my grandmother didn't have any money to bury him, so they had to take donations to bury him. And the military wouldn't change his name, even though his name was naturalized to Daniel. They said when he served, he was Michael Daniels, and so he's buried under Michael Daniels, even though that's not his right name, because that's the name he served under, which is kind of crazy. But
so with that, I guess that goes into what type of service in America that our family serves, like the government, military, and stuff like that. So
I think every male on our side has served in the military. So my Uncle Bill, who was the oldest,
Mm-hmm.
well, obviously, we're starting with your grandfather.
Great grandfather.
Great grandfather. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, starting with your great grandfather. He served in World War One. And then my Uncle Bill, who is the oldest son, he was a Marine, and he
World War
saw
II, right?
action in
Yeah.
World War II, and he saw action in Korea. My dad joined the army, and actually those two met up in Korea briefly, because my dad was in the army, and
It's kind of cool.
they met up during the Korean War. And then I served in the army, and I spent most of my time in Germany.
Which is where I was born.
Yep.
Yeah.
And basically, I was there during the latter part of the Cold War, so I babysat, nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
I was one of the release partners for nuclear weapons. That's what I did when I was there in Germany, a little town called Barnstorf is where I served. I lived in Diepholz. Obviously, you were born in Diepholz, and then you served
in the Air Force.
In the Air Force, and so I think everybody, everyone in our family served.
Yeah.
Even my nephew Joey, my sister's son, he served as well. So.
Cool. And any government service?
I don't know if you would call it government service, but my dad was he was a dog law warden.
Yeah, so dog warden. Yeah.
So he worked for
state government.
He worked for the county. I mean, all of his life he was a he was a laborer primarily. So he worked 6 months and then was laid off 6 months, and he worked 6 months and laid off 6 months. In his 60s, he actually got a job working for the county, Washington County, as a dog law warden, and basically he was animal control officer for I think it was 6 years. I think he did that. But I think that's the only outside of the military
that we know of. Yeah, that's the only one we know.
That's as much as I know.
So it goes into so what kind of education background does our family have?
Well,
that we know of.
Your grandma, Baba, that was my mom. She was the eldest of 7 kids. She graduated. The highest she got in school was 8th grade. And then my dad got thrown out of school in 8th grade for actually beating up a teacher. And so he never got any farther than 8th grade. My grandmother was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And he took a piece of paper for her to sign in the hospital, and she thought it was to get him back into school. He told her, he says, hey mom, sign this and I get put back into school. So she signed it. What she was actually doing was signing a waiver saying that he was old enough to go into the military. So he went into the military when he was 14 years old. So yeah, my dad went in when he was 14 and he looked 14. He looked really, really, really young. So that's how he got into the military, which is just kind of crazy the way that worked out.
Cool.
So I guess the only other thing is I'm the first one of our family to get a degree of any kind, and then so I got my 2-year degree at Penn State, and then I got my 4-year degree at Point Park. And then I went and got my master's degree, my MBA back at Penn State. So all of that, I did working full time at night, working full time and going to school at night. So I was the first one to graduate from college. So.
Thank you. And last question: what type of political activities were our family involved in?
Wow, I'll tell you, that's interesting because. My dad, even though he didn't have a whole lot of money, he was very well connected with the bar. And anyone that wanted to get elected came to my dad because my dad was a socializer. He didn't spend a lot of time in our bar. He spent a lot of time drinking in other bars and politicking for other people. So he was very, very good friends with the local magistrates, the district attorney. Well, partly because he was actually the president of the Washington Green County Tavern Association
Right.
himself, and he was really good friends with politicians. So Congressman Austin Murphy
Yeah.
was a very, very good friend of his.
I do remember my high school graduation, I think 2 senators came to my high school graduation. I'm like, I didn't think it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen them around before. And then people were like, that's pretty weird.
Yeah,
You know?
it really
Same with his
was.
funeral. His funeral had like sheriffs and former
District
lawyers and
attorney,
district attorneys and former congressmen and
magistrates.
senators.
He was really, really, really well connected. Well, part of it was just because my dad had successfully defended himself in court a couple of times because he had he was involved in a couple of shootings, and but partly just because he knew people, and he could get people elected. In fact, I remember one day, and this isn't really a political thing,
Right.
but this we lived in a very, very, very Italian town, and I remember when one day there was a knock at the door, and that was my dad was tough. It was the first time I ever saw my dad afraid.
Yeah.
And when he answered the door, and I had never seen my dad afraid, but it was like the blood drained out of his face. The guy came into the house, and he just asked if he could have some time with my dad, and my dad sent us all outside, and come to find out that the guy was in the mafia, and he was trying to get somebody elected, and he wanted my dad to help him get this.
So what did he say?
My dad actually said that he had given his word to somebody else, and that he was actually politicking for his opponent.
Yeah.
And that he couldn't go against that because his word was his word, and my dad's word was his word. For as crazy as it was, he taught me a lot about honor and integrity, and say what you mean and mean what you say. Right? That was my dad, and the guy, respectfully, basically said, okay, I respect your position. He didn't force him, into anything. He told him he wished it could be different.
Right.
But he didn't force him in anything, and didn't hold us in any,
That's
ill will or anything, anything like that. So that's the extent. He was very well connected. He actually started 2 political action committees through the local Italian club. He got the Italian club together, and they started political action committees, and I think that was the first time I ever heard the term, and I don't know when that was, but it was it was when they were raising money for candidates, and most everybody they wanted to get elected got elected. So I know it's probably more than you wanted to know, but it was interesting. It was an interesting way to grow up, and it was interesting to see his political connections. So.
Well, thanks for sitting down and interviewing with me for my class.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good luck with this. This is kind of.
It's Edward Daniel Senior and Junior.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to remember some of this stuff, and now we've got it documented, which is good. Maybe we should do this forever.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.